Couch. Some of you will have heard his whakapapa tracing. He's the real historian in the family. And Donald, can I pass it over to you now, please?
My young sister, you know. Actually, I'd like to talk without this, but I'll fight with it for a start anyway. Kei te pihi au kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rātātou. As Alan said, I have made a presentation previously up in Ashley to the William and Frances Couch descendant reunion, and also down at the Paipeta one. So this is second level course. I'm going to make some assumptions that you know about the family and move on from there. But feel free to ask questions at any time. I did prepare some notes, and I'll sort of jump around. I'll read a bit from them at times, and other times just to speak to the slides. There's a handout. There are two handouts. The first one, most of you have got. There are more copies available. Amongst the Grovies here, we have some, and there's some over here for anyone who did not get that. And then towards the end, I'll hand out the detailed one with all 550 plus descendants and so on. Let me start with George William Arthur Couch and his arrival in New Zealand. He actually came into Littleton on Thursday, the 4th of December 1884, and he arrived with off the Coptic, the steamship Coptic. He was a 22-year-old young Tommy, and came to Littleton, and have I got a clicker?
Oh, yeah. You want it?
Can you go to the next one? The Littleton that he arrived in, this is a painting, and there's a print of it there. This painting was done in 1884, and actually I think one of the ships in there is the Coptic. So it's just 4 years later, and if you want to have some idea of what Littleton was like at the time, that picture describes it pretty well. Some of us have copies of this, obviously. There's a shop in Littleton on London Street that has those prints, and if you want those. John Gibb, the painter, also did one with Rapaki, and several people here have copies of that. And the same thing. Several years ago, I think it was the school and the Harbour Board produced copies of those. So if you're interested, they are available. Last time I looked anyway. Yep.
So there's a photo of a trip, Australian print or a postcard.
Oh no, it's that size. Yeah. There may be at the gallery in Christchurch small postcard sizes because that's where they are. The Rapaki one particularly is in that old Christchurch section. It's in one of the windows of one of the shops there. The trip out from London took 44 days. I was thinking of that yesterday when Catherine and her family arrived from Vancouver in 14 hours. And you can go to London now in 24 hours. So quite a different era when it came out. We know a reasonable amount about the trip, and if you're interested, there are copies in the press of the time about the Coptic's arrival. And we actually have a copy of a letter that George wrote from, or he mailed it in Cape Town on the trip out. And it has quite a few descriptions of things he sent back to his parents. And in particular, he talked about crossing the equator and the ceremony that they used to have, of King Neptune and so on. It's quite an interesting description. I can remember the first few flights when I went from here to Canada. One of the airline companies did give you a certificate saying that you had crossed the equator. That's all long gone, of course, these days. But that's how they used to celebrate that. One of the interesting things about the description of the trip was that there were actually 298 passengers, including 73 single women immigrants. Fortunately for us, George didn't succumb to any of those ladies, His fate awaited him 3 miles up the harbour at a place called Grafton. And we'll talk about some more of that in a little bit. George was born in 1861 in Deptford, which is near Greenwich in London. Some of us have visited that area. His father, John David Couch, was probably working at the naval dockyard there. And again, the correspondence that we have copies of, that George wrote back to his parents, has the addresses, and you can actually go, and some of us have been to some of those places in Deptford or Greenwich, where the family used to live. And you can still see that, at least you could 10, 15 years ago, and I don't think that would have changed since then. If you've been to that area, the environment wasn't very good, and that's probably one of the reasons that George came out. He had a touch of TB as a record of that, and he probably was seeking a healthier environment. He was also young, looking for some adventure, new opportunities. Not uncommon, of course, for young people. Probably there were difficult times for the family then at Greenwich. His parents stayed in Greenwich for a while, through the 1870s and 1880s, but there are several references to seeking increases in their pensions and so on. Finally, in 1892, George's parents moved to Lane End, which is a little village, 1,000 people, maybe the size of Littleton almost, near High Wycombe. And again, a number of cultures have been there, and there are still relatives in Lane End. And they ran, George's parents ran the post office there for a while. Another reason for George to come out was that his elder brother, Peter, had immigrated to New Zealand in 1873 when he was 18. He had married here and he had 3 children by the time that George arrived. So he lived with his family in Littleton, and some of his correspondence back to his parents also survived. And we have to assume that George had read that, and so he heard good stories about New Zealand and Littleton, and that was one of the reasons that brought him. There's one other reason that I think is important, and that is we can assume that there was a missionary aspect to George's voyage to New Zealand. He came from a Christian background, and he was a lay preacher, which is, of course, how he met his future wife when he came out to London. Okay, can I talk about the English Couches? The Couch name is pretty well known in the southwest of England, and I've been able to trace our branch back to Devon and a wedding in 1746 of Peter Couch and Agnes Baker in Stoke Fleming. Now, if you go there, you will find our name down in the southwest. In Cornwall, it's usually called Couch, and in Devon, it's Couch. That's the general picture. But if you travel around in that area, for instance, several people see Couch's Mill in Cornwall. At this stage, I'm sure we're all related somehow or other if you get enough far enough back. I've only personally been able to get back to 1746, and it's all been in Devon. So in the handout, I've got a listing of the tenants. I just wanted to give that to you so that those of you who are interested can make some starts on all that, and you'll see that the places where those cultures were baptized were all in Devon. Stoke Fleming, Brixham, they moved to Brixham, which is a fishing port there, and they married people from within about 10 miles of that area. And so you can trace through from the original Peter Couch. There are 2 more. There are actually about 10 Peter Couches that I've been able to track. So that can be a bit confusing. And on the second page, you'll see under 4H, George William Arthur Couch. There's his older brother, Peter Couch, who was born in 1855, and that's the one who came out here before him. And then just the younger sister to George was Susanna, and she married Payne, who eventually married a Lewis, and right down the bottom of that page, David Lewis is the person that a number of us have visited.